Así amaneció el entrevistado.
Son las 8 de la mañana con 34 minutos y a esta hora tenemos al señor Howard Stoffer. Él es ex miembro del Servicio Exterior Superior del Departamento de Estado de los Estados Unidos. Bienvenido a la mesa Así Amaneció, señor Stoffer. Muchas gracias por su tiempo. Quisiera preguntarle qué posibilidades hay de que esta guerra entre Rusia y Ucrania pueda involucrar a más países y detone en una tercera guerra mundial.
Good morning, Mr. Stoffer. Thanks for being us here in Así Amaneció. We would like to ask you, first of all, what's the chance that other countries might get involved and start a third world war?
Well, that's a very good question. The Russians have begun a criminal war. They're committing war crimes. And there is a real concern that if the war continues, they might, and they're losing ground, their offensive is stalled. And so there's a fear that in order to make up for that, they might use chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons. And if they do that, then all of the NATO countries and probably other countries in the world will all be involved because the Russians can't get away with using weapons of mass destruction.
Bueno, lo que nos dice él es que hay un miedo mundial de que los rusos empiecen a usar armas químicas y armas nucleares y que de darse eso podrían haber grupos de países de la OTAN que puedan estar en una guerra también, y no solamente países de la OTAN, sino países de otros lados del mundo.
Se pensó en un inicio que esta incursión militar rusa iba a ser rápida. Sin embargo, tenemos ya un mes de guerra entre Rusia y Ucrania y no ha sido fácil para el ejército ruso tomar la capital, Kiev, pese a la diferencia abismal entre el armamento y el número del ejército del ejército ruso. Son miles, son muchísimos. ¿Cuál ha sido la fortaleza del ejército ucraniano que se ha mantenido firme defendiendo su capital?
At the beginning, Mr. Stoffer, it was thought that the war was going to end real quick because of the difference between soldiers and armaments and weapons that Russia has. But yes. It's been taking more than a month. So what's been the difficult for Russia to win the war, and what's been the strong part of Ukraine who can stall this Russian army?
I think the answer to that question is that the Russians miscalculated how much Ukrainians would fight for their own home country. They'd fight for their land. They're willing to die rather than live under Russian occupation. And in addition to that, the Russian forces that were sent in were mainly conscripted forces. In other words, people who were forced to be in the army for a year or less. And they're completely untrained. They're completely unaware that they were even involved in a war, and many of them don't have the discipline and the training that other armies in the world, Western armies, have in the world. And as a result, they came up against very hardened, very trained, very well prepared Ukrainian forces who are now, fighting back. In the long run, the Russians have still 90% of their forces left. They still have all of the ability to bring great harm to Ukraine. But the Ukrainians are pushing back valiantly. And this is one of the great miracles that they're fighting so effectively. And they're able to hold back the Russians. If they're able to hold back long enough, there might be a chance that Putin will change his goals. And instead of, destroying the country, he may agree to hold on to some territory if Ukraine doesn't become a member of NATO, and if Ukraine remains a neutral country.
Lo que dice el señor Stoffer es que los rusos calcularon muy mal la guerra, que ellos nunca se imaginaron la forma valiente y agresiva con que los ucranianos prefieren pelear que vivir bajo el régimen ruso, y que los soldados que han enviado a la guerra los rusos son soldados que no están entrenados, que son conscriptos, es decir, que son esos que van por obligatoriedad una vez por un año. Sí, no, van por un año a la...
Son jovencitos.
Sí, y no tienen mucho entrenamiento. Y que él piensa que puede haber una posibilidad de que si la guerra se siga alargando, Ucrania pueda hacer que Putin cambie su forma de pelear esta guerra y que cambie su forma de parecer.
Señor Stoffer, ¿qué papel juega China en este conflicto? Porque todo el mundo está mirando absorto, obviamente el mundo entero rechaza esta guerra. Sin embargo, China ha sido muy prudente en sus declaraciones y en tomar parte hacia de un lado u otro.
Mr. Stoffer, what's China's role? Because China has been really soft in the matter of being against or pro this war. What's the role that China has in all of this?
That's a good question as well. The Chinese have a principle that they've lived by since they established their country in 1949, the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of another country.
Okay.
And they are very much in a hard place because on the one hand, they're supposed to have this understanding and friendship between Presidents Putin and President Xi of China. And yet, on the other hand, they don't like the idea that Russia is just coming in and destroying a country next to its neighbor using 19th century or 18th century, forms of disregarding the international system that was set up after World War II, not to invade another country, not to change borders with violence and force, but to work through the United Nations. And as a result, the Chinese are very much concerned that if they do help Russia, especially with military equipment, then they will be subject to the same sanctions, these massive sanctions that the United States has imposed on Russia.
Él dice que Rusia, desde que se formó como este gran país socialista, ha tenido una ley internacional que ellos la manejan, que es no interferir en lo que pasa en otros países ni en guerras en otros países. Sabemos que ellos tienen una gran amistad con Rusia, pero que al mismo tiempo a los chinos les puede preocupar muchísimo que Estados Unidos tome las mismas sanciones que ha tomado contra el país, contra Rusia.
Las sanciones económicas.
Las sanciones que han sido brutales contra Rusia, y eso los asusta a los chinos y por eso todavía no se han involucrado.
Mr. Stoffer, buenos días, Gretta Córdova lo saluda. Mi pregunta va relacionada a lo que leemos generalmente de muchos expertos. Hablan que no es una guerra de Putin, sino es una encarnación de un sistema totalitario en Rusia. Existe un rechazo generalizado de su accionar a nivel mundial y se consideran como crímenes de lesa humanidad, esa es la palabra.
Crímenes de guerra. Son crímenes de guerra.
Sí. Crímenes de guerra, crímenes de lesa humanidad, lo que está sucediendo. En ese sentido va mi pregunta. En este momento, ¿qué pasaría con Putin si decidiera salir de Rusia? ¿Iría preso?
Mr. Stoffer, with all that has happened in the war, there's a lot of war crimes, and Mr. Putin is more than his war, is a representative of a totalitarian establishment.
Yes.
What will it happen if Mr. Putin will travel outside of his borders?
Well, I don't think Putin, I'm calling him Putin, not President Putin, because he's a war criminal and he has committed war crimes through his military and for doing this. But Putin probably can't travel to too many places. He can probably travel to China. And you think about when the United Nations General Assembly voted 2 weeks ago to condemn the Russian invasion, 141 countries voted to condemn Russia. Only 5 countries voted with Russia, and that was North Korea, that was Eritrea, that was China, and it was
Syria?
A couple of other countries. And as a result, those are the only places he probably can go. Of course, he can't fly over any airspace because he can't fly. Where can he fly to? You can't fly over NATO anymore. He can't fly. He can go to China, but from China, he won't be able to fly anywhere. So basically, Putin is stuck. He's never going to be able to leave his country ever again. And if he does, he will be taken. he will be captured, and he'll be brought to the International Court of Criminal Court in The Hague for trial.
Bueno, él nos dice que él no lo llama presidente Putin, que lo llama Putin, porque es un terrorista de guerra, es un criminal de guerra. Nos dice que él solo puede viajar a 5 países, que fueron los que votaron a favor de él en la ONU. En
Nicaragua, Siria,
China,
China no.
Norcorea.
Venezuela,
y no me acuerdo cuál es.
Son 5.
Sí.
No, que no le
Y
interesa
que
ir
solo
allá.
puede ir a China y a esos países, pero no puede volar sobre otros países, y que él cree que va a estar involucrado, va a estar retenido, entre comillas, toda su vida dentro de su país, porque si no va preso. Yo le voy a preguntar algo que me ha sorprendido mucho en esta guerra, y que es la actuación de Israel. Israel no ha tomado parte aún, y quiero saber por qué. Mr. Stoffer, there's something that has surprised me a lot, and is Israel's point of view, and how can they have not take part of it, being such an ally of the U.S.? Why?
Yes. I think you have to understand that Israel is in a very difficult position. Israel is threatened by Iran, an existential threat, meaning that if Iran ever gets a nuclear weapon or capability, they can destroy Israel. And they've said over and over again at the UN that they want to destroy Israel, not just harm it, destroy it. So Israel is always bombing Iranian forces that are deployed in Syria. They're always bombing the missiles they're bringing in. They're always bombing the material, the military material they're bringing in, so that they can invade Israel at some point. And the Syrians can't do anything about it. But the Russians allow the Israelis to do that. So the Israelis are very concerned that if they take too strong a stand against Russia in Ukraine, they do provide lots of humanitarian aid, but they're not providing military assistance. And they're worried that if they do provide military assistance, then the Russians will turn against them and not allow them to start continually degrading, destroying the Iranian material that's being brought into Syria to attack them. So their position is delicate, is all I can say.
La posición que tiene hoy en día Israel es muy delicada, muy, muy delicada, más de lo que nos podemos imaginar, porque Irán siempre ha dicho que no solamente quiere destruir, quiere acabar con Israel, que Israel no exista más, y por eso con la ayuda, de cierta manera, de la relación que tienen con Rusia, han podido parar a Siria y a Irán de que no tengan armas nucleares para destruir Israel, y por eso su posición es muy delicada. Adicionalmente a eso, nos comenta que Israel está dando ayuda humanitaria, pero que no ha entregado ni armas ni ayuda militar a Ucrania.
Una última pregunta, señor Stoffer. ¿Cuánto tiempo más puede sobrevivir la economía rusa con las sanciones impuestas por el mundo a esa nación?
Mr. Stoffer, our last question. In your opinion, how long do you think that Russia can stand with all the sanctions that the U.S. and the world has punished them with?
Well, I think right now the sanctions that the world has put on Russia are already causing tremendous pain in Russia. Many young people who are under the age of 50 or under the age of 40, depending on your point of view, are leaving Russia. These are highly skilled professionals who are trying to get into the European Union and work there, or get to the United States or Canada and offer their skills there. They don't want to live in a country which is a total dictatorship, almost on the level of Stalin now, in Russia. So they're losing their talented young people. And of course, many people who got used to, having credit cards and buying luxury goods and eating good food and all the things that they got used to since the fall of the Soviet Union. Because I remember being a diplomat in the Soviet Union, there was nothing to buy for food, and there was nothing in the stores. It was very grim, and there were no restaurants, etc. Now these people have had a very comfortable life, and that is all gone. No credit cards will work. The ruble is all they have, worth 1 penny or less, and all their stocks are not worth anything. These sanctions are really starting to hurt, and people at some point are going to be asking themselves, why are they supporting a war that is causing havoc in their lives indefinitely? And at the same time, let's not forget the mothers of the soldiers who were the ones that forced the Soviet Union to leave Afghanistan. the mothers of the soldiers are starting to ask the question and appear in protest rallies. These mothers are saying, "Where is my son? Why is he fighting in a war against our brothers, the Slavs, in Ukraine?"
Bueno, nos dice que él cree que ya las sanciones están tomando una posición muy fuerte en Rusia, que la gente está ya empezando a sufrir, y que nos acordemos primero dos cosas. La primera es que los jóvenes de entre 40 y 50 años y 30 años no vivieron lo que vivieron los rusos de la Guerra Fría. ¿Por qué? Porque él dice que él era un diplomático y veía cómo en Rusia no había nada. Y la gente no tenía que comer y que no podías comprar nada, etcétera,
Claro.
etcétera. Y que ahora la gente está empezando a vivir lo mismo, que la moneda rusa está a un penny.
A un centavo.
De dólar, y que la verdad es que van a empezar a sufrir y a reclamar por esto porque ellos no lo habían vivido nada, habían tenido ya una vida cómoda en comparación a los antiguos rusos.
Les va a pegar fuerte.
Y el segundo punto muy interesante es que él nos habla de...
Él dice que hay una inmigración de jóvenes.
las madres
Exacto.
de los soldados, perdón. Las madres de los soldados están sufriendo y están diciendo, ¿dónde están mis hijos? ¿Qué pasó con
¿Por
mis
qué
hijos?
están en una guerra entre hermanos,
¿Por
en
qué
eslavos?
porque están en una guerra contra hermanos de que somos todos generalmente de una misma etnia, que son los eslavos, y por qué tenemos que pelear contra ellos, dónde están y por qué yo tengo que hacer que mis hijos desaparezcan de esta manera.
También dice que hay una gran cantidad de profesionales que están muy capacitados, que están emigrando y buscando en dónde trabajar en los países de Europa.
Vamos a ver si es posible.
Son las 8 de la mañana, 51 minutos. Queremos agradecerle muchísimo al señor Howard Stoffer, ex miembro del Servicio Exterior Superior del Departamento de Estado de Estados Unidos, por haber nos dado y regalado algo de su tiempo y estar esta mañana con nosotros en la mesa de Así Amaneció.
Mr. Stoffer, thank you very much for all your time. It's been very, very rich in information, and thank you very much for for being here in Ecuador through Así Amaneció.
Thank you so much, and please send me a link of this radio broadcast when you get the chance.
Claro que
I
sí.
will. I will send you
Of
a
course.
WeTransfer of the interview. Thank you very much.